Today I'm going to dive into the exciting world of Planet Coaster 2 guest behavior, and I figured I would set up this little experiment to kind of determine what drives a guest's deepest desires. And that's something I've wanted to know because I play Planet Coaster 2 in both regular mode, the creative sandbox mode that we all know and love so much, and I also like to play in the challenges that they have. You know, usually it's related to park performance, like how much money you make in a day or how much ride revenue you generate in a day. And those challenges are a lot of fun, and I actually have two parks. One is a joint venture type park. The other one is just me playing it. It's called Eden. And in Eden, I have tried to kind of streamline what I get out of a guest experience in my park to the point where I have around $2 million of the park's money, and it doesn't ever seem to drain down. So I figure the park's set up pretty good to generate money. But one of my biggest things is learning what guests desire the most, because if you remember way back to Roller Coaster Tycoon 1, there's a ton of videos out there that kind of dive into the experimental realm of what do guests do, guest behavior, things like that. And you can kind of crack it in a few different ways. There's ways you can put things like on the left, I believe it is, and guests will almost always gravitate towards those. But Planet Coaster 2 peeps are not like Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 peeps. They are very different, and their ultimate desire, which I figured out in this video, is very interesting, and it's very telling. And I don't know if it's something that you can use to your advantage whenever you want to. I know that you probably could figure out how to, but here's the premise. This is the setup and the premise. So what I'm doing is setting up an area where all of the guest needs are being provided for. So it's drinks, it's food, it's balloons, there's a seat, there are entertainment staff, and then of course there's staff that run the other stuff. There's a bathroom, there's a janitor to keep the area clean, and there's a pathway into the guests' feet for them to walk around. What there isn't rides. Nothing is cheap. I do make some adjustments to the prices to kind of get a feel for it, but I've pretty much maxed out the prices on everything because I wanted to see if the guest gets desperate. Is the first question I had. If the guest gets super desperate, would they pay whatever was being asked of something if it fulfilled one of their needs? And I can tell you right now the answer is no, because their ultimate need has nothing to do with any of these things. Their ultimate need couldn't talk there. Their ultimate need boils down to something that I couldn't provide if I was running this experiment, which I find to be interesting. So come along with me here. Let's dive into this. Watch this footage here of the guest. I'm going to speed it way, way up so you do not have to sit through, I believe in total there was almost an hour and a half of footage, and I've trimmed most of it. There was a bit of a problem, and I'll get right into that here in just a second. But this is the setup. This poor guest is going to go through this experience, and don't worry, I have not released them in the video, but in the regular game, yes, this guest has gone about their way and has achieved their full and deepest desire. So I set everything together, I put it all in place, I started to run the clock forward, and I went to make dinner. And while I was recording, I lost 29 minutes of my footage because of this stupid pop-up that comes up in game, and I was out cooking at the time, so I didn't see it, but I still managed to run a full simulation of the guest, draining them down to all of their possible lowest limits. So there it is. After boiling everything down to the very bare minimum of a guest's behavior and trying my best to try to drive their stats all the way into the ground, the guest's ultimate desire comes true, and that is the desire to go home. It is so interesting to me that the number one thing that a guest cannot get rid of down into their deep core is the desire to leave the park to go home. It does not matter how well their needs are being taken care of, at some point, this desire to go home overrides every other thing in their existence, and the guests only want to leave the park. And you can do a lot to try to mitigate that, but when a guest wants to leave the park, eventually it overrides all of their other programming. And I think that is fascinating that the developers put that in place. I don't know, it's so strange to me. I don't know if it's a thing to keep the memory from filling up in the game. I don't know. You don't want to keep a guest perpetually forever in a park because in programming, I'm sure there's a way that memory gets used up by a person, a peep, not a person, a peep, being in the park for longer than a certain amount of time. They start to, I don't know, I'm sure they would start to build up a hefty presence. And I don't know if that was like Frontier's way of solving that or not. I don't know. I don't know why. I think it's kind of realistic. I mean, we've all been to a theme park, and or most of us have. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you've been to a theme park before. But you more than likely reached a point where you were ready to go home. And I'm sure that if you're like me, if you're really ready to go home, not much is going to convince you to stay in that park for too much longer. But yeah, it's just so fascinating. And I hope you've liked this experiment. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. I thought about going deeper with experiments like this. I have a couple more. I have one on a very, very fast turnaround ride that carries a very gravitating presence to it, so it pulls a lot of guests in, and they're willing to pay just about anything for it, and it has an extremely high throughput. That was some experiments that were done in RCT1 especially, and I want to try to continue that in Planet Coaster 2. I think it would be very useful, because if you're like me, you love the money management side of the game, you're always looking for ways to make cash. So thanks so much for watching. Hit like on this video if you enjoyed it, and hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.